Hey there, and welcome back to Crime Stats Daily. I'm Kim. Let's get started. The phone rang just after breakfast. For the woman answering it, there was nothing unusual about that Tuesday morning. She had spent decades working, saving, paying off her mortgage, and looking forward to retirement. Like millions of older Americans, she'd earned the peace that was supposed to come with those years of hard work. The man on the other end of the line sounded calm, professional, authoritative. He introduced himself as a federal agent. He knew her full name. He knew her address. He even knew personal information that convinced her this had to be legitimate. And then came the words that changed everything. Your identity has been connected to a criminal investigation. He explained that her bank accounts could be tied to money laundering. He warned her that if she discussed the investigation with anyone, including her family, it could interfere with a federal case. The instructions were clear: withdraw your money, protect your savings, move everything before it's too late. And by the time the call ended, fear had replaced reason. And within days, a lifetime of savings had literally disappeared. Unfortunately, stories like this are no longer rare. Across the United States, thousands of older Americans receive calls every day from people pretending to be FBI agents, bank investigators, technology support specialists, government employees, or even family members in desperate need of help. The voices sound convincing, the stories sound believable, and the financial consequences can be devastating. For years, most people imagined these crimes were committed by a lone scammer sitting behind a laptop in a dark room across the globe. It's an image we've all seen in movies: one criminal, one computer, one victim. But investigators now say that image is badly outdated. Today's largest fraud operations look nothing like that. They resemble a business, sophisticated businesses with organizational charts, managers, supervisors, training programs, performance goals, human resources departments and technology departments, money specialists, even customer relationship scripts. The only difference is that their product isn't customer service. Their product is deception. When most of us think about organized crime, we picture drug cartels, human trafficking rings, illegal gambling, or money laundering. Rarely do we picture a phone call. Yet, according to law enforcement officials around the world, financial fraud has become one of the fastest growing forms of transnational organized crime. It crosses borders, it exploits technology, it moves billions of dollars, and it leaves victims not only financially devastated, but emotionally shattered. What makes these organizations especially dangerous isn't simply that they steal money, it's that they weaponize trust. They understand human psychology. They know how people respond to fear. They know how authority influences decision making, and they know exactly how to create urgency before anyone has time to think. They don't need to hack your computer. Sometimes all they have to do is convince you to trust the wrong voice. This realization has forced investigators to rethink everything they believed about modern fraud. These aren't random crimes, they're coordinated operations. One person may place the call while another handles text messages and another oversees cryptocurrency transfers. Someone else launders the proceeds. Another group recruits workers. Another develops scripts. Another identifies potential victims. It's an entire business model, one that has proven incredibly profitable. And while the victims are often Americans, the criminal network behind a single phone call may stretch across multiple countries before the money finally disappears. Today's investigations begin with a simple question: who is really on the other end of that phone? The answer takes us thousands of miles from the United States. It takes us inside a criminal industry that most people have never seen. And it reveals why law enforcement agencies around the world are treating these scams not as isolated fraud cases, but as organized crime. Earlier this year, an international investigation led by the FBI, working alongside India's Central Bureau of Investigation, targeted 3 call centers that authorities say were responsible for defrauding hundreds of Americans. According to investigators, the operation impersonated government agencies and financial institutions, convincing victims that their money was in immediate danger. So instead of protecting their savings, the victims unknowingly handed those savings directly to criminals. Authorities estimate that more than 650 Americans were victimized. Reported losses approached almost $49 million. 6 alleged leaders were arrested, and for investigators, the case represented years of painstaking work. For victims, it represented something far more personal: lost retirement savings, canceled travel plans, delayed medical care, homes that suddenly had to be sold, and dreams that would never be realized. It's easy to measure fraud in dollars. It's much harder to measure it in broken trust. And as investigators followed the evidence, one discovery became increasingly clear. The phone calls weren't coming from a single city or even a single country. They were part of a sprawling international network stretching across South and Southeast Asia. Some operations were based in India, others operated from Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos. And investigators were beginning to uncover a criminal ecosystem far larger than anyone had imagined. What looked like separate fraud complaints filed by victims across the United States were, in many cases, connected by invisible threads: the same phone numbers, the same scripts, the same financial techniques, the same criminal methods, the same cryptocurrency wallets. Piece by piece, investigators began assembling a puzzle that extended far beyond traditional fraud. They were uncovering an industry. So imagine walking into an office building that employs hundreds of people. Rows of desks stretch across enormous rooms. Employees wear headsets. Computer monitors glow late into the night. Supervisors walk between the aisles. Large screens display performance metrics. And at first glance, it could be any modern customer service center. Except every conversation taking place inside that building has a single purpose: convincing someone somewhere in the world to surrender their money voluntarily. To people making those calls, the people making those calls don't all play the same role. Some specialize in government impersonation, others pretend to work for banks, some claim to represent technology companies, others spend weeks building fake online relationships before introducing an investment opportunity. Each person has a script. Each script has been tested. Each successful call is measured, rewarded, and refined. This isn't improvisation, it's production, it's a process. It's organized crime operating with corporate efficiency. For years, many of these operations expanded quietly. Jurisdictional boundaries slowed investigations. Many crossed borders faster than legal paperwork. Digital currencies complicated financial tracing. And while investigators in one country were gathering evidence, the criminal organizations often shifted to another. The result was a game of international cat and mouse, one that criminals frequently seemed to be winning. But eventually something changed. Thousands of individual complaints began telling the same story. Banks noticed familiar transaction patterns. Financial analysts began tracing cryptocurrency wallets that appeared in case after case. Suddenly, crimes that once appeared unrelated started pointing toward the same international network. And that realization marked the beginning of one of the largest coordinated fraud investigations in recent years. The question was no longer whether these operations existed. The question had become just how large they really were. The answer surprised even seasoned investigators. The public often sees the rest, the headlines, the press conferences. What we rarely see is the machinery behind these criminal enterprises. To understand why these scams continue to grow, we have to step inside the places where they begin. Imagine a campus surrounded by fencing and office buildings, dormitories, security checkpoints, parking lots. From above, it doesn't look like the headquarters of an international criminal organization. It looks like an ordinary business park, except almost every person inside has one job: separate strangers from their money. Investigations by international law enforcement agencies, journalists, and the United Nations have documented scam compounds operating in parts of Southeast Asia, particularly in areas of Myanmar and Cambodia, with similar operations identified elsewhere in that region. Some are run by organized crime syndicates. Others operate with the protection of corrupt officials or in areas where government authority is weak. While no two operations are exactly alike, many share one thing in common: scale. These are not 5-person operations. Some employ hundreds of workers, others employ thousands. Every day, thousands of phone calls, thousands of text messages, thousands of online conversations. Most fail. They don't need all of them to succeed. They only need enough. So think about it this way. A legitimate call center measures customer satisfaction. A fraudulent call center measures something entirely different. How many people answered? How many stayed on the line? How many transferred money? How much was stolen today? The metrics are different. The business discipline is remarkably similar. Employees often work from prepared scripts. Supervisors monitor conversations. New scams are tested. Successful techniques are repeated. Unsuccessful ones disappear. Like any business, these organizations are constantly trying to improve their performance, except their customers never intended to become customers at all. As investigators pieced together these operations, another disturbing discovery began to emerge. Not everyone making the calls was a willing participant. For years, reports surfaced from people who thought they were accepting legitimate jobs overseas. The advertisements looked real: customer service representative, sales consultant, marketing specialist, competitive salary, housing provided, travel included. For someone searching for work, it sounded like an incredibly wonderful opportunity. For many, it became a nightmare. According to investigations by the United Nations and multiple international law enforcement agencies, thousands of people have been trafficked into scam compounds after responding to fraudulent job offers. Some traveled willingly, believing they had accepted legitimate employment, and once they arrived, their passports were confiscated. They were told they owed money for transportation, housing, and recruitment fees. Leaving wasn't simply discouraged. For many, it became impossible. Survivors have described being threatened, beaten, deprived of food, or punished for failing to meet production quotas. Others reported being forced to participate in scams under constant surveillance. It's an important distinction. Not everyone inside these compounds is a victim. Many are willing participants. Many are career criminals. But international investigators have also documented thousands of trafficking victims forced into the very fraud operations that steal from people around the world. That reality makes these organizations even more disturbing. They exploit victims on both ends of the phone. Understanding that doesn't excuse the crimes. It doesn't lessen the suffering of retirees who lose all their life savings, but it does reveal something important. These aren't loose collections of scammers. They're criminal enterprises capable of recruiting workers, controlling compounds, laundering money, intimidating employees, and coordinating fraud across multiple countries. That's a level of organization we normally associate with drug cartels or human trafficking networks. Increasingly, investigators are placing these scam operations in that same category because the evidence suggests they often overlap. Every successful scam follows a carefully designed process. It begins long before the victim ever answers the phone. Criminal groups purchase stolen personal information from data breaches, names and phone numbers, email addresses, sometimes partial social security numbers, sometimes banking information, and sometimes information gathered from social media. The more they know about a potential victim, the more believable the story becomes. And then comes the first contact, a phone call, a text message, an email, an online advertisement, or even a message through social media. The method doesn't matter nearly as much as the psychology behind it. The conversation almost always begins the same way: authority, urgency, fear. The caller claims to represent someone you already trust, like a federal agency, a bank, your investment company, a technology firm, sometimes even local law enforcement. But then comes the urgency. Your account has been compromised. Your identity has been stolen. Your computer has been hacked. Someone is trying to wire money overseas. You must act immediately. Finally comes isolation. Don't tell your family. Don't contact your bank. Don't hang up. Stay on the line. Every minute spent talking to someone else increases the chance the scam falls apart. Every minute spent talking to the scammer increases the chance it succeeds. And none of this happens by accident. These conversations are practiced, they're refined, they're improved. Much like sales organizations study customer behavior, these criminal networks study human behavior. They understand fear, they understand trust. They understand that when people believe they're protecting their money, they're often willing to move it. But here's what makes these crimes especially difficult to stop. The phone call is only the beginning. Once a victim agrees to cooperate, an entirely different team may take over. One person explains how to withdraw the cash, another arranges the purchase of gold, another provides cryptocurrency instructions, and someone else coordinates couriers or financial transfers. And by the time the victim realizes something is wrong, their money has already passed through multiple hands. The caller who earned the victim's trust may never even touch that money, and that's by design. Every layer protects the people above it. Every transfer hides the people behind it. And every transaction makes investigators work just a little bit harder. It's a system built for one purpose: to make stolen money disappear. And for years, it worked. Victims filed reports in Florida, Arizona, California, Texas, New York, and each case appeared isolated: one family, one phone call, one financial tragedy. But investigators were about to discover something remarkable. Those individual stories weren't isolated at all, they were connected. And once investigators began following the money instead of the phone calls, the true size of the criminal network finally began to come into focus. The breakthrough didn't happen because of one dramatic arrest, and it didn't happen because of one lucky tip. It happened because investigators started asking a different question. Instead of asking who made the phone call, they asked, where did the money go? Every financial transaction leaves traces. Sometimes those traces are obvious. More often, they're buried beneath thousands of electronic records spread across banks, payment processors, cryptocurrency exchanges, and financial institutions around the world. To most people, they're meaningless numbers. To financial investigators, they're evidence. Victims in different states describe nearly identical conversations. The names of the agencies change and the stories change, but the methods remained remarkably consistent. Someone claiming to be from the FBI, or someone claiming to be from a bank, someone claiming suspicious activity had been detected, someone insisting immediate action was the only way to protect the victim's money. Separately, each complaint looked like another heartbreaking scam. Together, they began revealing a pattern. Investigators compared thousands of records and phone numbers, email addresses, voice recordings, bank accounts, cryptocurrency wallet addresses, courier deliveries, shipping records. Every new case added another piece to the puzzle. Sometimes a cryptocurrency wallet that appeared in one investigation showed up again months later in another. Sometimes the same phone number surfaced in complaints filed hundreds of miles apart. And sometimes victims who had never met each other described nearly identical conversations using almost the same words. Those similarities weren't coincidence. They're fingerprints. Not fingerprints left on a weapon, but fingerprints left in data. One of the greatest challenges facing investigators was speed. Criminal organizations understood that every minute mattered. The moment a victim transferred money, the clock started ticking. Funds might be divided into smaller amounts, moved between multiple accounts, converted into cryptocurrency, transferred across international borders, or exchanged for assets that were difficult to trace. The goal wasn't simply to steal the money, it was to make recovering it nearly impossible. Financial investigators sometimes describe the process as peeling back layers of an onion. Every layer removed exposed another beneath it. Every discovery raised new questions, and every answer often led to another country. Fraud investigators today rarely stay within one jurisdiction. So a victim may live in Florida. The initial phone call may originate somewhere else. The money could pass through financial institutions in several countries before reaching a cryptocurrency wallet controlled by an organized crime group operating thousands of miles away. That means that local police, federal investigators, financial intelligence units, foreign law enforcement agencies, and private companies all have to work together. Without international cooperation, many of these investigations simply would be impossible or would be possible. One investigation illustrates just how complicated these cases have become. Working with India's Central Bureau of Investigation, the FBI helped identify 3 call centers that authorities say were responsible for targeting older Americans through sophisticated impersonation schemes. According to investigators, callers convinced victims that they were speaking with government official or financial institutions. Victims were instructed to move their retirement savings into what they believed were secure accounts. Instead, investigators allege the money flowed directly into the hands of criminals. Authorities estimate the operation affected more than 650 American victims, with reported losses approaching $49 million. Search warrants were executed, computers were seized, financial records were examined, and 6 alleged leaders were arrested. For investigators, it represented years of work finally coming together, but it also revealed something far larger. If 3 call centers could generate that level of financial damage, how many others were still operating? Search warrants don't just recover evidence, they reveal how organizations function. Investigators examined computers looking for victims' lists. training manuals, internal communications, payment records, performance reports, even handwritten notes. Every document helps reconstruct how the organization operated, who supervised whom, who handled financial transfers, who recruited employees, and who communicated with victims, and who profited from the fraud. Each answer strengthens the case. Each answer may identify another suspect. Each answer may uncover additional victims who never realized they had been connected to the same criminal enterprise. But despite these successes, investigators remain realistic. Arresting one group doesn't end the industry. Organized crime adapts. New phone numbers appear. New websites are created. New scripts are written. New workers are recruited. Sometimes entirely new organizations emerge. It's a cycle investigators have seen before. Shut down one operation, another one takes its place. That's why many experts believe enforcement alone cannot solve the problem. The criminal business model remains extremely profitable. As long as the rewards outweigh the risk, new organizations will continue trying to replace those that have been dismantled. This raises an uncomfortable question. Why has financial fraud become so attractive to organized crime? Drug trafficking crimes carry logistical risk. Weapons trafficking attracts intense international attention. Counterfeiting requires manufacturing and distribution. Telephone and online fraud requires something much simpler: people, computers, internet access, and persuasive voices. For criminal organizations, the investment is relatively small. The potential return can be enormous. In many cases, the greatest weapon isn't advanced technology, it's human psychology: fear, trust, authority, urgency. Those four emotions have become some of the most valuable commodities in organized crime. Perhaps the most unsettling lesson investigators have learned: these organizations aren't succeeding because they're technological geniuses. They're succeeding because they understand people. They know when we're frightened, we're less likely to think clearly. They know that when someone appears to represent authority, we're more likely to comply. They know that urgency suppresses skepticism. And they know that isolation prevents victims from hearing the one sentence that could stop the crime. That doesn't sound right. Understanding that psychology has become just as important as tracing bank accounts, because every successful investigation begins long before an arrest. It begins by understanding how the criminals think. And once investigators understood that, they began seeing an even larger picture. This wasn't simply a collection of fraud cases. It had become one of the fastest growing business models in a global organized crime. But why? Why would sophisticated criminal organizations shift their attention away from traditional crimes towards convincing ordinary people to answer a phone call? And the answer is surprisingly simple: because it works. For decades, organized crime relied on products: illegal drugs, counterfeit goods, weapons, stolen property. Every one of these crimes required transportation, storage, distribution, and constant exposure to law enforcement. Fraud changed the equation. Instead of moving illegal products across borders, criminals learned they could move fear. Fear weighs nothing. It crosses every border. And unlike drugs or weapons, fear leaves no fingerprints. A convincing voice, a believable story, a sense of urgency. Sometimes that's all it takes to steal more money than a traditional robbery could ever produce. Investigators often describe these organizations as businesses. And like any business, they measure return on investment. One successful phone call may generate tens of thousands of dollars, occasionally even more. Most calls fail, most victims hang up, but they don't need every call to succeed. They only need enough. Imagine making thousands of calls every day. If only a tiny percentage result in a financial loss, the operation can still generate millions of dollars. That's the business model. It's built on volume, persistent, and human psychology. So, why are older Americans so frequently targeted? The answer isn't because they're less intelligent. That assumption isn't supported by the evidence. They're targeted because they often possess something criminals want: decades of accumulated savings, retirement accounts, home equity, investment portfolios. Many have spent a lifetime building financial security. Organized crime sees that security as opportunity. And once someone has been successfully victimized, investigators say that may be targeted again, sometimes by the same organization and sometimes by another. In some cases, criminals even contact victims pretending to be investigators or recovery specialists, promising to recover stolen money for a fee. Instead, they steal even more. It's known as a recovery scam. For someone already coping with financial loss, it can be emotionally devastating. There's another reason these crimes often remain hidden: embarrassment. Many victims never tell anyone. They fear being judged. They believe they should have recognized the scam. Some are worried their families will think they can no longer manage their finances independently. Others are simply too ashamed to report what happened. That silence benefits the criminals because every unreported crime leaves investigators with one less piece of the puzzle. Every report matters, not just for the victim, but for everyone who may be targeted next. The encouraging news is that the response is evolving. Banks have introduced fraud prevention training for employees. Financial institutions increasingly monitor unusual withdrawals and wire transfers. Technology companies are identifying fraudulent accounts more quickly. Cryptocurrency investigators have become far more sophisticated in tracing digital assets, and law enforcement agencies around the world are sharing intelligence faster than ever before. These efforts won't eliminate fraud overnight, but they are changing the landscape. Every international investigation makes it more difficult for organized crime to operate without consequence. And every successful prosecution sends a message that borders are no longer the protection they once were. That doesn't mean the responsibility only belongs to government or banks. Awareness remains one of the most effective forms of prevention. Legitimate government agencies do not demand payment in cryptocurrency. They do not instruct people to purchase gold to protect an investigation. They do not request gift cards as payment, and they do not tell you to keep an investigation secret from your family. If someone pressures you to act immediately, asks you not to tell anyone, or insists that you stay on the phone while moving money, those are warning signs that should stop the conversation immediately. The safest response is often the simplest: hang up. Call your bank using the number on the back of your card. Contact the agency directly using its publicly listed phone number. Talk with a trusted family member or a friend. Take a few minutes. Legitimate organizations will still be there. Scammers rarely will. When investigators look back at one of these at these cases, one theme appears again and again. Almost every victim believed they were protecting their money, not giving it away. And that's an important distinction. These crimes don't depend on greed, they depend on fear. People aren't trying to become wealthy, they were trying to avoid disaster. That's exactly what the criminals wanted them to believe. Let's go back to where we began. A phone rings. It's an ordinary Tuesday morning. A retired American answers the call, and everything that follows depends on a single decision: trust the voice or question the story. That moment may last only a few seconds, but it can determine the financial future of an individual or an entire family. It's easy to think these crimes happen to someone else until the phone rings, until the caller knows your name, until the story sounds just believable enough. That's why understanding these organizations matter, because organized crime has changed. It no longer operates only in dark alleys or hidden warehouses. Sometimes it arrives very politely, speaks professionally, and asks you to help protect your own money. The investigation we've explored today isn't really about technology, it's about trust. It's about the way organized crime has adapted to a connected world, and it's about the people, both victims and investigators, caught in that struggle every day. The FBI's work, along with that of international partners, has disrupted major fraud operations and brought some of those responsible to justice. But the broader fight continues. New organizations will emerge, new tactics will be developed. Artificial intelligence will almost certainly make these scams even more convincing in the years ahead. That means awareness can no longer be optional. It has become part of personal security. Knowledge won't stop every scam, but it gives us something criminals fear for: time. Time to think, time to verify, time to ask questions. Sometimes these few extra minutes are enough to save a lifetime of savings. If you found this investigation valuable, consider sharing it with someone you care about, a family member, a friend. It could be a parent, a grandparent, a friend, or a neighbor. One conversation may prevent one phone call from becoming one more statistic, because behind every number is a person, behind every complaint is a family, and behind every investigation is a hope that the next victim never becomes one. I'm Kim. Thank you for joining me here on Crime Stats Daily. I'll see you in the next one.